December has always been my favorite month, not because of the cold, my bones aren't as forgiving as they used to be, but because it used to mean warmth, lights, traditions, and the soft kind of joy that only comes when a family chooses to be together, not just out of routine, but out of love. Yet this year, from the moment the calendar flipped to the first week of December, everything began to feel different in a way I couldn't quite name at first, like a wrong note in a song I had heard my entire life, and suddenly I found myself moving through my own home as if I were a housekeeper hired by a family that did not know my name, let alone the sacrifices I had made for decades. My son, Daniel, started it. He dropped off his laundry without a word, not even in a hamper, just a heap on the floor outside the guest room, as though he expected it to magically clean itself, and when I called out after him, he simply said, "Thanks, Mom," before disappearing into the living room to sink into the sofa like a teenager rather than a 32-year-old man with a wife and 2 children of his own. His wife, Emily, wasn't any better. She strutted around my kitchen like she was reviewing a hotel suite she didn't quite approve of, opening cabinets and glancing at pots and pans with a sigh that suggested I was somehow failing her, as though hosting them for the entire month of December was not already a gift that required emotional stamina, financial budgeting, and an endless supply of patience that only a mother could possess. She'd say things like, "Oh, you're out of almond milk again," or "Didn't you wash the kids' pajamas yet?" with that thin smile, polite enough not to be called rude, but disrespectful enough to bruise me in ways I pretended not to feel. My daughter, Lily, arrived 2 days later with 3 massive suitcases and a calendar full of holiday parties she expected me to help her prepare for. Apparently, being 56 meant I was not only the family matriarch but also the designated personal stylist, chauffeur, emotional support worker, and on-call event coordinator. She'd shout from her old bedroom upstairs, "Mom, can you steam my dress? Mom, have you wrapped the gifts yet? Mom, what are we eating tonight?" And sometimes I would just stand in the hallway, holding a warm towel fresh from the dryer, wondering when exactly my first name disappeared and Mom became less a word of affection and more a summons. A bell rung in a servant's corridor. I thought maybe I was being dramatic, that maybe I was simply tired, but the difference was too sharp to ignore. They didn't talk to me, they talked at me, and not one of them asked how I was doing, whether I needed help, or whether I even wanted to host all month long. Instead, they took up every corner of my house, leaving trails of crumbs, half-empty cups, and holiday shopping bags as if they were marking their territory. When I entered a room, they barely looked up. When I cooked, they ate without noticing the effort. When I cleaned, they stepped over me like I was part of the furniture. The laughter that filled the house wasn't shared with me, it happened around me, as though I were invisible. I tried to keep my spirits up the way mothers do, telling myself that it was just the stress of the holidays, that everyone was busy, that maybe I had gotten too used to quiet evenings and the sudden return of noise felt overwhelming, but deep down, I knew something had shifted, something small but sharp, like a needle pressing into the fabric of our family dynamic. The second week of December was worse. By then, I had somehow become their morning alarm clock, their chef, their reminder app, their babysitter, their errand runner, and their unofficial maid. They would sleep in, and I would be downstairs at 6, preparing breakfast, loading the dishwasher, folding blankets, wiping down counters sticky with spilled cocoa no one bothered to clean, and picking up toys scattered by my grandchildren, sweet children who only imitated what they saw their parents model. When they asked for something, they used that tone children use with nannies in old movies, impatient, entitled, detached. The weight of it grew heavier each day, pressing on my chest as I moved around the house, trying to keep things tidy. Why not because I wanted perfection, but because disorder makes my mind feel scattered, and I have survived too much in life to give up the small parts of peace that belong to me. But peace was not something I had anymore, not in December. They filled my time with tasks they didn't want to do and filled my silence with expectations they never voiced but always assumed I'd fulfill. And every night, when the last light was turned off, and the laughter died down, I found myself sitting at the edge of my bed, my hands resting on my knees, wondering why I felt more like an outsider than a mother in a home I had lived in for over 30 years. I told myself I shouldn't take it personally, that children grow up, get busy, get careless, but it wasn't carelessness, it was convenience. They weren't treating me poorly by accident. They were treating me this way because it benefited them. That realization tightened something inside me, not anger yet, but awareness, a quiet, patient kind of noticing that mothers develop only after being pushed too far for too long. I began observing small patterns, how they always left the kitchen a mess after using it, how they never helped carry groceries in, even when they watched me struggle with the bags, how they assumed I would handle their little problems, like returning malfunctioning gifts or picking up last-minute items, because mom always knows what to do. I overheard them laughing about how lucky they were to have me handling everything, as if that were my life's natural role, not a choice, not a gift. But what hurt most was not what they said, it was what they left unsaid. No gratitude. No recognition. No moment where any of them paused to ask themselves whether I, too, deserved rest in December. I tried talking to Lily one night, gently hinting that maybe we could divide the responsibilities, but she brushed me off with, "Mom, you're overthinking. It's just easier if you handle it. You're better at this stuff anyway," as if my exhaustion were a trivial inconvenience barely worth acknowledging. I swallowed the words I wanted to say, letting them dissolve into that familiar place where mothers store all the disappointments they aren't allowed to express. Still, something inside me, some sleeping part, began lifting its head. I began to notice details I would have missed before. How they planned their days without including me. How they treated the house not like a family home but like a hotel, where everything should run smoothly without their involvement. How they praised each other's accomplishments and overlooked my efforts as though they had always been part of the wallpaper. The unfairness of it didn't explode inside me, it simmered. It simmered while I scrubbed pots late into the night. It simmered while I folded laundry that wasn't mine. It simmered while I served dinner plates that were met not with thank yous but with critiques like, "Did you season this differently?" or "Why is this colder than last night?" December, once full of warmth, felt like a season of erasure, my identity being scraped away little by little until only my usefulness remained. But I am not a woman who breaks easily. Life has pulled many heavier burdens from my shoulders. I survived widowhood, financial struggles, raising 2 children alone, and the endless storms life throws at a mother who refuses to give up. I had learned long ago that disappointment does not destroy me, it shapes me. It teaches me. It prepares me. And this December was teaching me something important, that my children no longer saw me, not as a person, not as a woman, not as someone worthy of rest or respect, but as a resource. A background character in the story of their holiday comfort. But I also learned something else, something far more vital. When a mother is overlooked, she observes. When she is dismissed, she listens. When she is underestimated, she learns exactly where the cracks are in the people who take her for granted. And I was learning. I was learning their routines, their assumptions, their carelessness, their entitlement. And without meaning to, they were giving me every tool I needed. Every quiet slight, every ignored request, every thankless task, these things weren't just insults, they were information. Information that would matter later. Information that would guide me. Information that would become power. I did not know yet what I would do with it. I only knew that deep inside me, something was gathering strength, waiting for the right moment, the right spark, the right truth to reveal itself. And when it did, when I finally discovered the reason behind their sudden neediness, their manipulation, their insistence on keeping me busy all December, my disappointment would ignite into something much sharper. But that comes later. For now, I continued my silent tasks, moving through my own home like a servant they didn't pay, didn't thank, didn't respect, while inside me a quiet awakening was beginning, an awakening that would change everything before Christmas morning arrived. The truth revealed itself on a cold mid-December morning, the kind where the windows fog over and the house feels smaller because everyone is still asleep except the one doing all the work, and I was standing at the stove stirring oatmeal for the grandchildren when I heard voices drifting from the kitchen doorway, not loud, not arguing, but low and conspiratorial, the kind of whispering adults use when they know they shouldn't be saying what they're saying, and before I could make a sound, I heard Emily's voice, sharp and slick like a knife sliding over glass, saying, "She's so easy to manage. As long as she's busy, she won't ask questions, and Daniel responding with a chuckle so familiar and so foreign at the same time. Just keep her occupied until the 25th. After that, everything will be sorted. For a moment, I froze, my hand tightening around the wooden spoon until my knuckles turned white, because something in their words sank deeper than simple disrespect. It felt intentional, calculated, and suddenly, I felt like the walls around me weren't walls at all but curtains hiding a stage I didn't know I'd been performing on. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I listened as my daughter-in-law continued, "She's been doing everything anyway. Might as well take advantage before we go." Before we go. Those 3 words struck me like cold water to the face, because go implied leaving, and leaving implied plans I had not been part of, invited to, or even vaguely informed about. My heartbeat quickened, but I remained silent, letting their voices fade down the hallway while I stared at the oatmeal bubbling softly on the stove, feeling as though the bubble bursting had happened somewhere inside my chest instead. When I finally composed myself, I finished breakfast mechanically, setting the bowls on the table without tasting or feeling anything, the way someone moves after hearing bad news they're not ready to accept. But I wasn't going to jump to conclusions. I've lived long enough to know assumptions can be dangerous, so I decided I needed proof, something concrete, something undeniable. Later that afternoon, when the house was quiet and the others were distracted, Lily was upstairs doing her makeup for another holiday party, Daniel and Emily were on the sofa scrolling through their phones, and the grandkids were watching cartoons. I slipped into my room and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling slightly as I opened my phone. I clicked on the family group chat, the one they assumed I didn't know how to use well, the one where they often posted pictures I liked to look at but rarely responded to because they never waited for my answers anyway. I scrolled up casually at first, pretending I wasn't searching for anything specific, but then I saw it, a message thread dated weeks back, one I had never fully opened, and when I tapped into it, the air left my lungs in one long, silent exhale. There it was, an entire Christmas getaway planned without me. Not a small trip or a casual outing, an elaborate, multi-day vacation at a ski resort, reservations made, itineraries discussed, excitement shared. They talked about which rooms to book, which restaurants they would try, how they could finally relax without obligations, and worst of all, how grateful they were that Mom will keep the house running till the 25th. They even assigned tasks for me, as though I were an employee. She can watch the kids while we finish packing. She'll handle the food prep the week before. She always gets our gifts wrapped perfectly, we should drop ours off early. And then the blow that split something inside me wide open, Emily had typed, "Honestly, she's basically the help at this point." Followed by a laughing emoji. Followed by Daniel agreeing. I sat there reading their words over and over, each time feeling a different emotion rise and fall inside me, shock, hurt, disbelief, humiliation, and then, slowly but unmistakably, clarity. A clarity so sharp it felt like someone had wiped my vision clean for the first time all month. They weren't thoughtless. They weren't overwhelmed. They weren't accidentally leaning on me too much. They were using me. Strategically. Intentionally. Conveniently. They wanted a stress-free holiday, and I was the tool they chose to achieve it. Suddenly, every interaction from the past 2 weeks made sense, the way they kept me busy, the way they filled my schedule with tasks, the way they discouraged me from resting, the way they dismissed my suggestions. They weren't avoiding including me out of forgetfulness, they were avoiding it because they had already decided I didn't belong. I was good enough to babysit, cook, clean, and prepare their perfect holiday, but not good enough to be part of it. I felt the familiar sting behind my eyes, the one mothers get when the people they love most show them a version of themselves they never wanted to see. I didn't cry, not yet, but my throat closed as though the tears were waiting behind a locked door. After several minutes of staring at the screen, I forced myself to breathe. Deep, steady, controlled. Then I read the messages again, this time with purpose. I analyzed their conversations, the dates, the planning, the SMUG casual tone of people who felt justified in their decisions. I noticed which parts they deleted, which parts they edited, as if they were polishing the ugliness into something less incriminating. They truly believed I would never see it. They assumed I didn't know how to navigate group chats, assumed I was too old or too naive to understand how smartphones work, and assumed I was too busy scrubbing their countertops to pay attention. And that assumption would become their first mistake. Because the moment I saw those messages, something inside me shifted, slowly at first, like the turning of a great wheel, then faster, with purpose. I felt a calmness wash over me, not the gentle kind but the dangerous kind, the kind that comes when a mother stops trying to justify others' behavior and starts recognizing her own worth. The disappointment didn't scream, it settled. It rooted itself deeply, giving strength to something that had been quietly gathering inside me ever since December began. I locked my phone, placed it beside me, and stared at the wall for a long time, my mind replaying every moment they had dismissed me, minimized me, or taken advantage of me. The realization didn't just hurt, it redefined the entire month. They had built their ease on top of my exhaustion. They had anchored their holiday on my labor. And they had done it knowingly. As the evening approached, I walked out of my room and moved through the house with a kind of detached attentiveness, watching them interact, behave, laugh, bark orders, and drop their responsibilities onto me with the confidence of people who believed they were owed something. They had no idea I knew the truth. They had no idea the ground beneath their comfortable December had shifted. They had no idea that every move I made from that moment forward was no longer done out of habit or obligation, but out of strategy. In the days that followed, I acted no differently, not because I was afraid to confront them, but because confrontation was never the point. Understanding was. Timing was. Consequences were. I cooked the meals. I cleaned the messes. I wrapped their gifts so beautifully that even Emily, who rarely complimented anyone, said, "Wow, Mom, you're really good at this." I swallowed the urge to reply, "Of course I'm good at it. I've been doing it for all of you for decades," but instead I simply smiled and tucked her comment away with the rest of my observations. I noted how they continued to refer to the upcoming trip casually, always catching themselves before mentioning details in front of me. I noted how they avoided discussing the 25th openly, redirecting conversations whenever I walked into the room. I noted how they mistook my silence for ignorance. They truly believed I was oblivious. They believed I was grateful to be included in their chaos, grateful to have them home, grateful to be needed, even in the most dehumanizing ways. But their need for me wasn't rooted in love, it was rooted in convenience. And I had no interest in enabling that any longer. One evening, I overheard another conversation, this time between Lily and Emily, while I was folding blankets in the den. Lily laughed, her voice light and careless, "Mom won't even notice we're gone until we post photos. She'll probably be relieved." Relieved. As though I were the burden. As though they were the blessing. Emily agreed, honestly, she should be grateful we're letting her stay here all month. This place is huge for one person. That sentence nearly made me drop the blanket. Letting me stay? Letting me stay in my own home? The arrogance was astonishing, and yet it was also clarifying. Because when you hear a truth spoken carelessly, it often reveals much more than the speaker intends. They didn't value me. They valued my usefulness. And in their minds, that usefulness was infinite, unquestioned, expected. But there is a limit to everything, even a mother's patience. And mine had reached a point where it no longer bent, it crystallized. Instead of reacting, I observed further. I noticed financial details in their messages, receipts, booking confirmations, reminders about remaining balances. I noticed who paid what. I noticed timelines. I noticed what they expected to happen on the morning of the 25th. And then, almost without trying, I began to notice something else, opportunities. Little cracks in their plans. Small oversights that only someone who truly understood the workings of a household would see. They thought they were the masterminds of December, orchestrating a seamless escape. But they forgot one crucial truth: the person running the house holds more power than the people relaxing in it. And they had given me full access to everything, every device, every account, every schedule, every assumption they had made while believing I wasn't paying attention. I didn't take action yet. Not because I was uncertain, but because I believed in letting people reveal themselves fully before deciding how to respond. The more they acted freely, the more clearly I understood the boundaries they never intended to respect. And the clearer it became how precisely, how meticulously, how poetically the truth needed to be served back to them. With timing. With evidence. With impact. I gathered information the way mothers gather memories, gently, quietly, without announcing it. I saved screenshots. I noted dates. I watched them pack things slowly in corners of their rooms, believing I didn't notice the growing piles of ski gear, new coats, and matching boots. I watched their guilt flare briefly whenever I entered the room and fade just as quickly when they reminded themselves that I was too busy or unaware to suspect anything. They kept me occupied with tasks they thought would distract me, but all it did was sharpen my focus. Because once a mother knows she has been betrayed, her eyes become clearer than ever. By the third week of December, their trip was practically complete, every reservation confirmed, every detail planned, every expectation set. And every day, as they grew more confident in their secret, I grew calmer, more deliberate, more certain. They had treated me like the help, assuming I would never notice, never question, never push back. But they forgot one thing: helpers follow orders. Mothers do not. Mothers endure. Mothers strategize. Mothers choose the moment. And I was waiting for mine. I waited not out of fear, but out of intention. Revenge is most powerful when it arrives with truth. And I was preparing, not to punish them, that came later, but to reveal them to themselves. Because sometimes the deepest revenge is simply making people face the consequences of the selves they chose to be. They made their choice. And soon, very soon, they would see mine. By the time Christmas Eve arrived, my plans were stitched together so tightly that even I was surprised at how calm I felt moving through the house, watching them lounge around like royalty while I moved from room to room, silently rearranging the end of December the way a director rewrites the final act of a play just before opening night. They thought I was preparing some extravagant dinner to crown the month of my unpaid labor, but in reality, every motion, the way I checked their travel folders on the kitchen counter, the way I glanced at their phones left carelessly unlocked, the way I looked over the printed reservation emails they had sent to themselves, was about ensuring that when the curtain finally rose on Christmas morning, there would be no confusion about what had happened and why. It hadn't taken me long, once I knew about the trip, to realize just how much access they had unknowingly given me: passwords auto-filled onto shared devices, confirmation emails sent to the family computer, loyalty accounts, and booking apps logged in on my Wi-Fi. I didn't need to hack anything, all I did was look. And what I saw was enough to give me both the means and the justification to interrupt the perfect, selfish holiday they had built on my back. I didn't act on impulse, I moved with patience. In the days before Christmas Eve, I contacted the resort they'd booked through the number listed in their email, calmly explaining that there had been a change of plans and that the primary cardholder, that would be me, since the family credit card still carried my name, something Daniel had apparently forgotten, would no longer be attending the trip as scheduled. "We'll need to cancel," I said, my voice steady as the woman on the phone asked for details. I gave them everything I had: reservation number, names, dates, even the preferred room views they'd chosen without me, and when it became clear that canceling would incur fees, I smiled to myself and said, "That's fine." A small price to pay, I decided, for the lesson they were about to receive. I didn't stop there. I requested written confirmation of the cancellation and printed it, sliding the pages into a neat folder I had labeled "Holiday Plans" in my own handwriting, a small irony that made me almost laugh. Then I went back into the booking system and looked again, double-checking, triple-checking. The rooms were gone. Their perfect getaway was gone. Their assumption that I would happily keep the house running while they escaped the mess they made, gone. On Christmas Eve, I watched them buzz around the house with a nervous excitement that would have been contagious in any other year. Emily triple-checked the kids' coats and boots, Daniel carried suitcases into the hallway just to be ready, and Lily complained that her new ski jacket still had a crease in the sleeve. None of them noticed that I had stopped doing the little things that had kept their December so seamless. the dishwasher beeped, and I didn't rush to empty it. Wrapping paper littered the floor, and I stepped over it. The sink slowly filled with dishes, and I let them sit, my hands folded loosely in my lap as I sat on the edge of the armchair, pretending to watch a Christmas movie while my mind calmly went over tomorrow's script. At one point, Daniel glanced over at me and said, "Mom, did you prep the casserole for tomorrow morning?" And I simply smiled and replied, "Don't worry, I've taken care of everything for tomorrow." It was the truth, just not the version of it he imagined. That night, after everyone went to bed, I stayed up a little longer, not to bake pies or set the table, but to write. At the kitchen table, under the soft yellow light that had seen me through so many late nights comforting sick children, balancing bills, and making lists no one else ever saw, I wrote a letter, not an angry rant, not a bitter tirade, but a clear, detailed account of exactly what they had done and how it had made me feel. I wrote about being treated like a servant in my own home. I wrote about the group chat messages where they called me the help. I wrote about overhearing them say I needed to be kept busy so I wouldn't ask questions. I wrote about how it felt to know they had planned a holiday without me while using me to make their December easier. I described the weight of exhaustion I carried, the ache of invisibility, the way each small dismissal had turned me from their mother into a background object. And then I wrote something else, the part that mattered most, that this Christmas would be the last one where I allowed myself to be treated this way. That from this point forward, I would no longer be available as their default housekeeper, nanny, cook, and emotional sponge. That if they wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be based on respect, not convenience. I signed my name, not Mom, but my first name, as if reminding them that I existed before they were born, and I still existed now. When I finished, I slid the letter into the folder with the screenshots and the cancellation confirmations, then placed it carefully under the tree, nestled among the gifts like a quiet bomb waiting to go off in the soft hush of Christmas morning. Then, and only then, did I go to my room and open my own suitcase, a modest, medium-sized one I had packed earlier in the week. Simple clothes, a good book, and your warmest coat. I checked my own reservation, a quiet bed and breakfast by the coast, a few hours away, with no children, no demands, and no one expecting anything from me except my presence. I had booked it weeks earlier, after reading their messages, with the same card they had relied on all their lives. The irony was not lost on me, their greed had given me the funds for my freedom. I slept peacefully that night, more deeply than I had slept all month, knowing that for once, I was not going to stand in the kitchen on Christmas morning, sweating over food for people who couldn't be bothered to say thank you. I was going to stand in the middle of my living room and tell the truth. When I woke up, the house was still quiet, the light outside soft and gray, snow dusting the world just enough to make everything look gentle and unreal. I dressed slowly, choosing clothes that made me feel like myself, not someone working a shift, a soft sweater I loved, comfortable pants, my favorite earrings. I went downstairs and made coffee, just 1 cup. Not a pot for everyone. Just mine. I sat at the table and drank it hot from start to finish without being interrupted by someone shouting my name. It was such a small thing, but it felt like a ceremony, a private farewell to the old version of myself they had taken for granted. Eventually, the house began to stir, the kids burst out of their rooms in a flurry of excitement, paper crowns from some party already crumpled on their heads, shouting, "It's Christmas! It's Christmas," as they ran toward the tree. Daniel came down yawning, Emily trailing behind him, pulling her robe tighter, and Lily appeared a few minutes later, scrolling through her phone, her hair in a messy bun. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Daniel said, leaning down to kiss my cheek without really looking at me. This time, I didn't let the hollow gesture slide past. I looked up and said, "Merry Christmas," in a voice that held something new, something steady. He didn't notice. None of them did. The grandchildren began tearing at the wrapping paper, squealing over their gifts, and for a moment, I watched them with genuine affection. They were the only innocent ones in the room. I let them enjoy their joy. Whatever reckoning was coming did not belong to them. Once the initial chaos died down and the children settled with their toys, I cleared my throat gently. No one heard me. I spoke a little louder, "Everyone, can you sit down for a moment?" There's one more gift that needs to be opened together. Daniel, half distracted, frowned. Mom, can this wait? We still need to leave on time if we're going to beat the traffic. Lily glanced up from her phone and raised an eyebrow. Is this about breakfast? I'm starving. Emily sighed. We really do need to start getting ready, we're on a tight schedule, remember? Her tone held that familiar edge of impatience that used to make me shrink. Today, it made me straighten. Sit, I said, not loudly, but with a firmness that carried years of authority they had forgotten I possessed. Something in my voice made them pause. One by one, they sat on the sofa, on the armchair, on the edge of the rug. The kids glanced up nervously, sensing the shift in the room. I walked to the tree, reached under it, and pulled out the folder. What's that? Daniel asked, forcing a chuckle. You get yourself a gift this year? In a way, I replied. But it's really for all of you. I sat down opposite them and opened the folder, removing the first set of pages, printed screenshots of their group chat. I didn't say a word as I handed the stack to Daniel. He frowned, flipped through them, then went pale. His throat bobbed in a swallow. What is this? He whispered, though he knew the answer. Read it out loud, I said calmly. His hand shook slightly as he skimmed the messages, the ones calling me the help, the ones describing how they needed to keep me busy, the ones talking about how I'd handle everything while they went off to enjoy themselves. Lily leaned over his shoulder and sucked in a breath. Emily's face drained of color. The room, which had been noisy and bright with Christmas morning energy moments before, fell so silent I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Mom, we were just, Daniel began, but I lifted a hand to stop him. No. Not yet. I handed them the next set of pages, printed confirmations from the resort, including the note of cancellation. Emily grabbed them, eyes widening as she read. This is wrong, she stammered. These say the reservations were cancelled. They were, I replied. I called them myself. As the primary cardholder on the account. They were very helpful. You cancelled our trip? Lily burst out, eyes wide with disbelief. Mom, how could you do that? The outrage in her tone might have broken me once. Today, it only hardened my resolve. How could I? I repeated softly. You planned an entire Christmas getaway behind my back. You used me for childcare, food, cleaning, errands, for an entire month, so you could leave this house on Christmas morning with full bellies, rested bodies, and not a single worry in the world. You called me the help in your messages. You said I needed to be kept busy. You decided I wasn't needed. So I decided I wasn't available. No one spoke. I saw shame flicker across Daniel's face, then denial, then something like panic. Emily looked furious, but even her anger looked fragile under the weight of the truth laid bare in black and white. You went into our messages, she snapped, standing now, her voice rising. That's an invasion of privacy. I laughed, quietly, not out of humor, but out of disbelief that she could twist the situation so quickly. An invasion of privacy, I echoed. You plotted to erase me from your holiday while standing in my kitchen, eating food I cooked for you in a home I pay for with a card you still rely on. You used my labor, my time, my sleep, my body, and you're concerned about your privacy? Silence again. The children shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension, and I softened my tone slightly as I glanced at them. Go play in the other room for a little while, I said gently. We're just having an adult conversation. They obeyed, reluctantly, their small feet pattering away down the hallway. When they were gone, I pulled out the final paper, my letter. I didn't hand it to them. I unfolded it and began reading aloud, letting my own words hang in the space between us. I read about how it felt to spend December being treated like a servant. I read about the exhaustion, the invisibility, the way they piled their responsibilities onto me without so much as a thank you. I read about the moment I discovered their group chat and how each message felt like a small betrayal. I read about the hurt of being deemed unnecessary, the pain of realizing they saw me as a resource, not a person. And then I read the part where I explained my decision, that I would no longer be their default solution, their silent worker, their unseen backbone. That if they wanted me in their lives, they would need to show it through respect, reciprocity, and basic human decency. My voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It didn't break. It was steady, clear, and final. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it on the coffee table. No one moved. Emily's eyes were glassy now, the anger replaced by something unsteady. We didn't mean it like that," she murmured weakly. "It was just jokes." "Jokes reveal truth," I replied. "And even if they don't, your behavior did. You thought I'd never see it. You thought I'd never question it. You thought I'd just keep doing everything." Daniel finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything right now," I said. "You need to sit with this. All of you do." Lily had tears in her eyes, frustration and shame fighting for space in her expression. "So what now?" she asked. "What, we just sit here while our trip is gone and Christmas is ruined?" "Christmas isn't ruined," I said, standing up. "You still have each other. You have your children. You have a home. What's ruined is the fantasy that you can treat people like they don't matter and never face the consequences." I walked toward the hallway, and as I did, I heard the tremble in Daniel's voice when he asked, "Where are you going?" I turned back, my hand resting on the handle of my suitcase, which I had placed near the front door earlier. "I'm going on my own holiday," I said calmly. "A quiet place by the coast. A bed and breakfast. I'll be gone for a few days. No cooking, no cleaning, no last-minute demands. Just rest. Just me." Their faces were a portrait of disbelief. Emily's mouth fell open. "You're leaving? Today?" "Yes," I said. "Today. Right now." "But the kids," Daniel began. "It's your responsibility," I finished for him. "As they should have been all along. You are their parents. You can feed them, dress them, entertain them, and explain to them why Grandma isn't doing everything for everyone this year." For the first time all month, I watched them really look around the house, not as guests, but as people who suddenly realized how much work went into making it function. The unwashed dishes. The clutter. The gifts that still needed organizing. The mess of their own making. "Mom," Lily said, her voice cracking, "please don't just walk out like this." I walked back a few steps and stood in front of her, reaching out to gently touch her cheek. "I'm not walking out on you," I said softly. "I'm walking toward myself. There is a difference. And I should have done it a long time ago." Tears spilled down her face. She nodded, not in agreement, perhaps, but in understanding. Emily looked away, guilt softening the lines of defensiveness around her mouth. Daniel lowered his head into his hands. I picked up my suitcase, put on my coat, and opened the front door. The air outside was crisp and sharp, the kind that clears your lungs and makes you feel unexpectedly awake. I stepped out, then paused and turned back one last time. "Merry Christmas," I said. "Use today wisely. Not to feel sorry for yourselves because your trip is gone, but to think about the kind of people you chose to be this month. And decide if that's who you want to stay." I didn't wait for a reply. I closed the door gently behind me and walked down the path, my suitcase wheels crunching over the light dusting of snow. For the first time in a very long time I felt light, not because everything was fixed, not because they had suddenly learned their lesson, but because I had finally chosen myself. As the taxi pulled up and I got inside, I glanced once more at the house in the rearview mirror. Somewhere inside, my children were beginning to confront a truth they had spent all December avoiding, that the woman they had treated like a servant was, in fact, the foundation of everything they took for granted. And while they sat in that realization, I headed toward a quiet place by the sea, where I would drink my coffee hot, walk under pale winter skies, and remember that I was not just a mother, not just the help, not just the background of their lives. I was a woman with a name, a history, and a right to peace. They had spent December treating me like a servant. On Christmas morning, I finally served them the truth.